And welcome into another Gamecock Central podcast. Wes Mitchell here with Chris Clark. Hoping to do a few more of these than we have been lately. And obviously Gamecocks getting big news, really rolling in. Lots of good news lately, Chris. And I think we probably have to start with the pickup of Nick Harvey, Texas A&M grad transfer. And as we track these things, Chris, sometimes we have a really good idea what's about to happen. Sometimes, you're just never quite so sure. And the case with Nick Harvey is I think, we knew he had a good visit to South Carolina, but with the other schools going after him, the other official visits he took, it wasn't completely clear if South Carolina was going to be able to land him the way it sort of was with their other grad transfer, JT eBay. But they get the job done, and another recruiting win for Quavaris Robinson and Will Muschamp.
Yeah, nice pickup. And like you said, I think it was just thrown into doubt a little bit just because the first visit went extremely well, but that was his first visit after he announced his intentions to transfer. And so South Carolina got first crack. There's obviously some holes in the secondary in which they could plug Harvey into. And look, if you're a defensive back, you're going to be attracted to any situation that involves Will Muschamp and Quavaris Robinson because of their track record with defensive backs, their development of that position, sending guys to the NFL. That's always going to be an attention getter for any defensive back. And so the indications after the visit were really good, but there was also recognition of, look, this guy's got a bunch of other visits he's going to take. Auburn, Tennessee are in the mix, Arizona, Florida, Oklahoma State, all in the mix too. So there was a little bit of, I guess, worry about those other trips too, but they were able to hang on even after all those other visits. And I think that speaks to the job that the staff does recruiting and developing guys and making it an attractive situation for Nick Harvey.
And Chris, not very often you add a guy that has this sort of proven SEC experience. Transfers within the conference in football aren't really all that common. He's a guy who's played a lot at Texas A&M. From what I was reading up on him, pretty much when he was healthy, he was playing from the moment he was on campus. He started 12 games as a junior. Obviously missed last year with a knee injury, but his back says he feels 100% now. But you add a guy who's done it in the league, it is at the very least. I think there's no such thing as a sure thing when you're talking about high school kids or junior college kids. I think with someone like this, you at least know what you're getting. He's someone who started in the SEC, and I think, returned a punt for a touchdown in his one ever punt, his only ever punt return as a junior. He returned it for a touchdown, like 73 yards. You're not returning punts at a place like Texas A&M as well as they recruit without having some really high degree of athleticism as well. So, I think this is a kid that, comes in for South Carolina at your very, very lowest, very, very least. You're getting someone who's going to provide depth. But I think a very real possibility that Nick Harvey is the day one starter at cornerback, which would allow you to move Kenion Nixon to nickelback, which is, I think, something they've made no secret that they really like Kenion Nixon at that nickelback position. So when you look at losing three starters from last year in the secondary, being able to not only replenish that spot with guys like four-star J.C. Horn, Israel Mukwamu, who enrolled early and had a really good spring. But, Chris, adding guys that have played the position in conference really should help them kind of just be able to not miss a beat at those positions.
Yeah, and there are question marks, across the secondary, not only with holes in depth or just, for instance, at safety, you're not even exactly sure who your two starters are going to be. Stephen Montack could be one of those guys, but, there's also the question of, well, is the nickel situation fixed? Because if not, Montack may need to slide in there. Well, now, when you bring in a guy like Harvey, who the staff believes will help, and he really realistically could probably play any spot, what I hear is that the belief or the hope, rather, for South Carolina is to move Kenion Nixon over to nickel possibly, and that to me means that Harvey will probably fit in at corner somewhere. That allows you to keep Montack at safety. Then you plug in any other number of guys at safety, whether it's eBay, whether it's, if he gets back, 100% Jalen Dickerson, RJ Roderick may get a look there. You got McQuamu at corner, Corey Banks, Rashad Fenton's obviously going to be on the other side as a starter. So that gives you some more depth and some more flexibility in addition to a guy that you mentioned like Horn who can play corner, and Jemias Williams, he could play nickel. He could play some safety like he did last season as well. So a lot more flexibility with that. The thing that Harvey's going to give you out there if you put him at corner is he's going to make you better on the edge and run support. He was fourth on the team, I believe, at A&M in 2016. Had I think 66 tackles. So he's a guy that's got some physicality out there and can help on the edge.
Yeah, and I was going to say, as you're running down those guys, you hit on him there at the end. Let's not forget about Jemias Williams. I think this really opens things up to allow them, if they think he's a better fit as sort of a free safety. Obviously, he could still, be your backup nickel back as well. You can move him around. I think even week to week, I think at times last year, Chris, as Jemias Williams got more playing time, we saw them sort of switching him back and forth between that nickel and safety position based on that given matchup. So I think that when you have a guy like Jemias who is obviously a great athlete and a good football player, but has some issues as far as size goes, you try to put him in the best positions to succeed. And I think that's something we're probably going to see them now be able to do a little bit more. How do you see his skill set fitting in as a potential more of a safety as opposed to nickelback? I know Muschamp has mentioned that as a strong possibility. And, if he can play that position at a high level, it really helps their depth just across the board in the secondary, because now, like you said, you got JT Ebay coming in, you've got Montac returning, then a Javon Charleston and RJ Roderick, Jalen Dickerson. If he's a full go, then all of a sudden you actually have a decent amount of options there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the safety position is it's going to be more difficult for an inexperienced guy to play. Now, Williams obviously played a lot last season, but he was working at nickel as a freshman. And so, that would be, I guess you could say, the concern about Harvey or even JT Ebay. Even though those guys have played a lot of football, you're going into a new scheme. The safety position is one that's more difficult than playing corner in Will Muschamp's defense. I mean, there's a lot to learn there in terms of where to be and what to do. There's a lot of different things to know, different aspects of it. And so, I think that Williams still fits in well there because he's a guy that, he's not the biggest, obviously, but he's really instinctive. And you saw some last year that he was really good at going and trying to get the ball off people and succeeding sometimes at that, sort of roaming around a little bit. And obviously he's a guy who's speedy and quick and can get out there in coverage. And at safety, sometimes you're matched up one-on-one with guys, but sometimes you can be a little bit more of a guy who can come down in the box, or you could be a little bit more of a guy who can play middle field safety and roam around and try to make plays on the ball or run guys down. And so some of his game does fit that. And, he came out in the 2017 class, really, he was a guy that, could have fit in year one at safety. And if he was a guy that had been in the 2016 class and signed that year, he probably would have started out his career at safety, because South Carolina's hole at safety was even bigger then. I mean, it was an even bigger need than it was last season.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing right now is that they've been able to sort of very quickly replenish that position by doing it in multiple avenues. You go, obviously, the Keyshawn Nixon JUCO route, the previous class. Now you're able to add a couple of guys who, are grad transfers. You add a few freshmen in there as well. And I think it's a bit easier on the staff now recruiting off of a 9-win season, Chris. It's probably tough to get a guy like Nick Harvey, who's played at Texas A&M, who has these major offers, to buy in to coming in off of a 3-win season, which is what Muschamp inherited. It's probably pretty difficult even off of a 6-win season, because if these guys are transferring into a school, A, they want to play, but B, most of your grad transfers want to have an opportunity to win. So I think now being in that conversation, we're seeing it with the 2019 recruiting class, as far as high school and JUCO guys and the interest in major prospects. But I think Carolina's upward trajectory as a program and the perception that they're moving up is what gets you in the door with a guy like Nick Harvey. And then obviously what Muschamp and T-Rob have done with defensive backs probably is what locks that down for you.
Sure. I mean, you make a good point with that combination of, look, I mean, guys are most of the time not grad transferring to go sit on the bench somewhere. That they need some sort of, I mean, coaches aren't going to say, hey, you're going to be a starter, make that promise most of the time. It does happen. But certainly, not at South Carolina where, you promise a guy an opportunity, you show him the depth chart, you show him what he could do. And Harvey has started in the SEC before. It's not something he has not done before. And so the opportunity's there. And so, you combine that with the ability to play a competitive schedule in the SEC and win football games, which South Carolina's, like you said, on that upward trajectory. That's certainly something that helps. And there's not a ton of, precedent for a guy transferring in conference. You don't see it a lot. I mean, there was one recently with Maurice Smith from Alabama to Georgia, and he ended up helping Georgia a lot. And I'm sure if South Carolina got that level of play and leadership from Harvey, they'd be more than happy with that.
Yeah, I think you see it in women's basketball, it seems like, right. Fairly often, but you don't really see it in, like you said, in college football. So, and it's just not very often you get a guy that you literally know exactly what you're going to get. No matter how well you evaluate, no matter how good your process is, some guys you're going to get them in out of high school and they're going to be way better than you thought. Some guys are going to be way worse than you thought. I think with Harvey, you have a lot of tape there to see exactly what you're getting in this kid. Let's switch gears a little bit to the recruiting side of it, not with grad transfers, but with the class of 2019. On Sunday, Chris, South Carolina lands Traevon Kenion, who is a 4-star tight end on Rivals out of Monroe, North Carolina, Monroe High. And I think what we're seeing with this class, Chris, that maybe we didn't always see with the first two classes as Muschamp and this staff are trying to sort of put their imprint on everything. We're seeing South Carolina able to go out and either become major factors or in this case land like their top guy, the exact guy that they wanted. After they got Keyshawn Toney as a tight end in-state, sort of more of a developmental type kid maybe that's going to grow, I think, into a 250, 260-pound tight end potentially. We were told that basically they wanted a stretch-the-field tight end, that Traevon Kenion was one of just a couple of guys they wanted and were focused on, and they go out and they land one of their top targets at the position. And this is a kid that, was banged up last year, so he didn't play a lot, still had a nice offer list, but I was watching the film because I'm sure I watched it when he first got offered, but I didn't realize until I went back and rewatched it. This is a kid that can stretch the field, and this is a kid that has great ball skills for a tight end. So you start putting some weight on him in the college program, and this, to me, Chris, this kid could sort of be that next in line of really good pass catching tight ends that South Carolina has sort of quietly developed a reputation for.
Yeah, I mean, he's a kid that's pretty highly thought of because, he's a 4-star kid on Rivals.com, has some nice offers, but I think you could make the argument that he's a little undervalued and a little still under the radar because, he missed a lot of ball his junior year. He didn't play a whole lot of football with an injury, and so most of what you're recruiting off of is sophomore film. And what he did his sophomore season. Teams saw him a little bit last season. They could see him, some this year. But a lot of times when you're a junior, the hay's sort of in the barn as far as, guys that schools are looking at. You always see late bloomers. That happens. But you see a lot of offers go out really early. And so South Carolina was one of those early offers. They really liked him. I'm sure they'll have him in camp again this summer to, get another look at his development, keep an eye on him throughout the football season. But there's a lot to like there. He's a guy that's 6'4", has a frame where he can keep getting bigger. He has ball skills. He can run, like you said, stretch the field. So really interesting prospect and a really good pairing with Toney, who's a little bit more of, maybe that H-back type of player in the offense.
Yeah, and someone that I hope we'll get to see in camp later on or go get to see in a game because, like you said, there hadn't really been those opportunities to see him. Would have liked to have got to see him at Rivals Camp this past season, but someone that I think, again, like I said, he fits that sort of mold we've seen South Carolina have success with. And, not to mention, it's important for South Carolina to keep recruiting the Charlotte area and the greater Charlotte area. And you have another, I guess, case here of Bobby Bentley getting South Carolina in on a kid and, them being able to land him. And that's an area that I think we've always talked about, that South Carolina needs to be strong in Charlotte. We saw for maybe a stretch of the Spurrier era where they had some success there, but in the past, traditionally, I don't think South Carolina has done a good enough job in the Charlotte area. Now you're starting to see it pay off. You see it last class with Javon Gwynn. Obviously, Rick Sandage getting him on National Signing Day. This year, getting an early commit from Jalen Nichols, landing Traevon Kenion, continuing to recruit a guy like Quavaris Crouch. That's an important area for South Carolina, and I think we're seeing the work of those guys really start to pay off.
Yeah, no doubt. And Will Muschamp said early on in his tenure they wanted to treat, Charlotte as an in-state territory. It's less than 2 hours away in most cases, that area. Rick Sanders being from Concord, and then you saw Gwen from Charlotte proper, and a lot of the areas around there have good players. And South Carolina's the closest SEC program. You look at when Will Muschamp was at Florida, he would go and recruit Charlotte even there, landed DJ Humphreys out of Mallard Creek, former 5-star guy, eventual first-round draft pick at offensive tackle. So it makes a lot of sense to recruit there, as well as in-state and your other surrounding areas. There's a lot of talent to be had, and it's an area in which they need to do well. And so far, there's been some good returns there.
In that same category, let's talk real quick about Quavaris Crouch. Much needed, I think, unofficial visit for South Carolina, getting him on campus, this past weekend. By all indications, that visit went very, very well. I think that, and you've said it, I think multiple times when you've written about Crouch, is that, this is going to be a marathon. And I think, being around him a bit at Nation Ford High for the Charlotte Rivals camp, we kind of see that he's still very much trying to sort through things, Chris. And, there's been a lot of it's been a bit of a roller coaster at times. He's trying, I think, to really cut schools. And he talked about that during his interview with Adam Friedman there, that he's really actually cutting schools now, which I think was difficult for him to tell some schools no and to take them out of the picture. But it's been hard for him because he's also had to make this decision of cutting schools, but then am I running back? Am I a linebacker? I still think deep down, just personal opinion, I think deep down the kid wants to run the football, but at the same time, I think it's gotten in his head that, you could maybe have a longer career at linebacker, and he's kind of bought into that. So it's made a bit of a tough decision for him in that aspect.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the classic heart versus head thing, where his heart's with running back, and not that the head is going to win out, but the head has sort of been filled at this point, whether it's his own ideas or other people's ideas, people who know him or college coaches, or just some facts. There is some data, to back up the fact that you can be higher paid and have a longer career at linebacker. There are no guarantees, but all things being equal, that there is some data to back that up. And so, when you begin thinking about that and thinking about your future, there becomes a dilemma. Now, he has not played linebacker full time. He played more running back. He's got certainly shown flashes and ability at linebacker in the limited time he had, and he'll probably play it some more this season for everyone to get a better assessment of his abilities there. But, certainly he's an elite running back. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. And so you got that situation, and, look, Crouch may play more linebacker this year and decide, I really love this, and I think this is best for my future. Or he may say, my heart's with running back. That's what I want to do. And, he goes back and forth, I think, and it's something he's struggled with. But I don't think there's any doubt that if he is a running back, that does help South Carolina just because of the consistency in the approach and Bobby Bentley's relationship with him. But I think South Carolina's right in the mix. Right right where you'd want to be as much as you can be at this point, because it is still early. It's changed a good bit over time already, and there could be more changes forthcoming.
Yeah, and I think you used the word that came to mind for me, and that was elite. I think the question for me then becomes, as he's making this decision, is he an elite linebacker? And he very well may be, but I think as far as that conversation of, financially and longevity and his value as far as an NFL player goes in the future, maybe all things being equal, if he's considered just as good of a linebacker as he is considered a running back, then, maybe the data does push him to that direction. But the other side of that is that I think we've all seen him and said, this kid is an elite running back, is a game changer at running back. You don't want to project a high school rising senior to the NFL. That's kind of silly. But I think as far as the way we're looking at him right now, this kid is absolutely elite as a player. So at the running back position. So we'll see what the senior year brings, what the offseason brings. Like you said, there's going to be many twists and turns. I think as far as South Carolina, the best thing that you could say for South Carolina fans is that South Carolina has been consistently in the mix. And I even reported it. There were times where it felt like South Carolina had fallen back a little bit as he took visits to other schools. That was just my impression, of where things were. But getting him back on campus this past week, continuing to stay in the mix, continuing to have that long time relationship. I think South Carolina has proved that they're going to be in the mix to the end. And with so many different variables at play here, I think right now, Chris, that's about all you can ask is to be in it and to have the longevity that of that relationship that Bentley and Muschamp have with Quavaris Crouch.
Yeah, I mean, you want to have a seat at the table with a guy like him. He's not committing anywhere right now. And so to be in the mix like South Carolina is, to have that relationship, to have had him on campus so many times, to have that comfort level. There are a lot of schools recruiting them that would love to have that, and they don't. And so that's really all you can ask for. I mean, there have been ups and downs. You go back and look at any big-time prospect that South Carolina's landed, or really that any school's landed, most of the time, not always, most of the time there are ups and downs and periods of worry. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney, he extends his process to February 14th. Clemson comes in late. You got Alabama and everybody else recruiting him. I mean, you look at Marcus Lattimore. I mean, there was worry about him. I mean,
Marcus,
and he's
he named Auburn his leader. You remember that? He named Auburn his leader after his South Carolina official.
Absolutely. Penn State's randomly in the mix. He talked up Oregon a lot. I mean, there's just a lot going on there. And Marcus Lattimore is a very, not much drama there, in terms of how he conducted his business. So, when you've got big-time guys, they're not just itching to make a commitment. It's not just an automatic thing. It's not just, I like this school, this is where I'm going. They like a lot of schools. And Q is a really smart kid. He's a people person, so he's a relationship builder, and that's why it's, that can make it tougher on these kids. But he's just taking his time with it, and South Carolina's in the mix, and that's sort of where you want to be at right now, because that's really the best you can do at this point.
No doubt. And before we close it out here, Chris, I guess because we haven't done one of these, you and I, together in a while, we obviously haven't talked about, Ryan Helinski and that commitment, obviously early last month. And, he's done his part, I think, so far to work Crouch and work a bunch of other guys that South Carolina's recruiting. And I think worth mentioning as South Carolina looks to sort of close on a bunch of these guys that are top kids that are, getting offers and interest from all over the country. I think having that sort of true leader of the class who's going to put in the time to recruit other people for you, he's very active on social media. He's not scared to reach out to guys he doesn't even know and sort of start building that relationship. that's something South Carolina, for the most part, really hasn't had. So, in a while at least. So, I think getting a guy like Ryan Helinski in the mix, we talked on the message board, both of us, a ton about how important of a pickup this is on the field and his ability as a passer and everything he brings there. But I think with this recruiting class having some of the momentum that it does have right now, it's going to help to have a guy like Helinski willing to get on campus for you multiple times, even though he's coming all the way from California.
Yeah, I mean, that is an ideal situation, right? To get a guy who is sort of one of the headliners of your class, or maybe the headliner. I mean, when people go to a recruiting class and look and see, who's the guy, they're going to gravitate towards one of two things. It's going to be either they're going to look at the stars, and this includes prospects. I mean, they pay attention to that stuff sometimes. It's going to be the number of stars by the name, or it's going to be the quarterback, because, those are sort of seen, fair or not, as your sort of class leaders and the guys that everybody are going to follow. So, obviously Ryan's got that personality to where he likes to recruit guys. He's a connection builder. He's a guy that's got a personality that people sort of gravitate towards. And so for him to be able to come on campus and build relationships and be sort of an ambassador is important. When you're, college football coaches, they want to build a program, not that runs itself per se, but they want to be able to build their culture to where the best recruiting tool that they're going to have is their own team. So when guys come on campus, they're going to feel comfortable around the team, and the team's going to be able to be real with those prospects and say, here's how things are. This is why it's so good. And, talking to some of these prospects, Wes, that's what goes on now a lot at South Carolina. And, there have been some instances at some other programs recently where, kids visit on campus and come away and just say, I don't know about this, because the players on the team even are saying, I don't know about this. And so, Helinski helps with that because he's comfortable with the school. A lot of the players on the current team, help sell the program. So anytime you can get that, it's a positive. And for him to fly across the country and do that certainly shows how committed he is to the program. And I think it's going to be a useful tool for certain guys.
No doubt. Plenty of momentum for the Gamecocks right now on the recruiting trail. And, I think we'll see it continue. And the summer, Chris, will be as big as it's ever been. They've always had the camps this summer, but with official visits already happening, South Carolina will have a ton of official visitors on campus in June, on top of their regular camp sessions as well. So it should be a very, very interesting, information-filled summer on GamecockCentral.com. For Chris Clark, this is Wes Mitchell. This has been your Gamecock Central podcast. And make sure to check out all of our work on GamecockCentral.com and subscribe today.